Nikki, thank you so much for your time today.
Absolute pleasure.
Before we get to some of the more pertinent points, I was looking through your biography. You've been in politics forever and ever, and in terms of demographics, looking at your background, general election of spring 1979, why aren't you in the Labour Party? Why wasn't you in the Labour Party from your background?
Well, I grew up in a council estate, and I think obviously 1979 was the advent of Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
And I think it was just this very strong woman, and I think that captured my imagination.
Okay.
There was also the winter of discontent, and we had queuing up for bread, fire brigade strike, green goddesses on the street, all these type of things, rubbish stacking up. And it was like, well, they don't really care about the working, because we had a Labour government, and it wasn't like that they cared about us. And Margaret Thatcher said, well, if you work hard enough, you can achieve whatever you want to. So at the age of 10, somehow this resonated with me, and I thought, well, that's who I support.
Your raison d'etre to be here, Nikki, of course, is the referendum campaign.
Yes.
I'll go straight to that. Now the dust has settled post David Cameron's famous declaration on that. Were you a little bit disappointed with the conditions that he imposed on that?
Of the referendum?
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, there is no guarantees. He's talking about if he wins an outright majority. He's also talking about if he gets a renegotiation. Well, we've already heard certain leading politicians, such as President Schulz here in the Parliament, saying there can be no renegotiation. And what guarantees does he get from the renegotiation? If you remember that John Major achieved quite an opt-out on the Maastricht Treaty about the social chapter, only for Labour to win the next general election and sign us up to the social chapter, which is one of the things that I get most complaints about from small businesses, which are the largest employers within the UK. So what guarantees do we have? So there's no guarantees of a referendum. They're saying, well, we might have a referendum, but he's very pro-EU, he wants us to stay within the European Union, he wants to make the case. But what about if it doesn't follow how he wants it? And he's also, I mean, there might be a bit of an unholy alliance here between the Europhiles and us Eurosceptics. Because what we're arguing is that actually, if you're pushing this into the long grass, you're creating uncertainty for business. You're creating uncertainty for investment. And I think that's one of the things that I've discovered since becoming here as an MEP. I came here as a Eurosceptic. I wanted to leave. I don't care. I just wanted to leave the European Union. And I've changed in those 3.5 years. What I've actually witnessed here is that we're in a terrible halfway house, and that the politicians from the Labour, the Conservatives, the Lib Dems, they're not doing the British people a service. They're not proactively making the case because they can't. They've got one eye over their shoulder looking at the electorate back home. So we're in this halfway house. We're neither fully in and fully engaged here, nor are we outside the European Union, which I think is still the best way for us. And that's why I'm so pro-referendum, that I actually think that whatever which way, we need to make a decision, because this current situation of a halfway house is disastrous, and Cameron knocking it into the long grass is just the worst possible medicine for the UK.
I mean, David Cameron, you know, when he said in his last election, yes, Europe is a factor and we'll bring that up, satisfy the backbenchers or something like that. I think the phrase he used was, but we shouldn't keep banging on about Europe. And it's kind of like maybe 12 on the list as far as people are concerned. So that disconnect is what I'm saying to you. We said this yesterday off camera, but what do you think about that? If we can't engage citizens, I mean, the participation for any elections you care to mention, council, local, referenda, European elections, you're averaging 37, 40 something percent, you know. So whether you're Eurosceptic or pro-Europe, what do you account for, or what would you like to see in that disconnect with people?
Well, I think that the reason why you get low turnouts is where people feel, as you say, disconnected from politics. And I think that's because of the advent of the professional politician. People are told what to think. I mean, in the UK, we've just had police commissioner votes, so people didn't understand what they were. It wasn't articulated well enough. They had the election in winter, and you had turnouts of about 12%. So the main political parties in the UK have actually given a disservice. They've turned it into professional soundbite politics, and we have less and less conviction politicians. And I admire Margaret Thatcher and I admire Tony Benn, totally different from the wings, as you would say. But I admire both of them because they very much stand up and say what they believe, and we have that missing in politics. But I think on the European issue, to go back with this, yes, you only have maybe 30% turnout in a European election, but with my mobile surgery, it's going around the region, we get people queuing up to express their opinion that they want a referendum or they want to leave the European Union. So people do care about it. I do follow the thing that what you're saying is that if there was just a vote on a particular day, it could be that they weren't happy with the government of a day. And you do get that. I think the referendum in France on Maastricht was a particular just rebellion against not Maastricht, on the constitution, was a bit of a rebellion against the French government. But what we're calling for in the We Demand a Referendum Party is a royal commission.
Yes.
Yeah, to look at the cost-benefit analysis, because one of the things that turns people off about the debate on Europe now, if I had someone pro-European sat next to me, someone like Malcolm Harbour, we'd be spending 15 minutes arguing about how much percentage. I say 73% of our, or 75% of our laws are made here in the European Parliament. He say, no, it's not. I say, we spend £53 million a day in the European Union. He says, no, we don't. And we'd be arguing about that. We need to find out the facts.
Yeah.
And I think we need to have an intelligent debate, okay? And then let the people decide. And people say, oh, but people don't really understand the complexities of the European Union. Well, sorry, we're a democracy. I read a piece in one of the newspapers about the last general election, because the last general election was based on an economic argument, and only 15% understood the economic arguments.
Yeah.
In the middle of a recession. But we still elected a government. So are those people who don't want a referendum, are they making the case that democracy's, is finished, and that we should go the Mario Monti route in Italy and just have technocrats ruling our countries?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's why it's about, the European Union. We became citizens of the European Union in Maastricht 1992. That fundamentally changed the constitutional position. No one asked me if I wanted to change my citizenship.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fundamental change. And if you ignore the will of the people, or ignore the people, they'll think, well, what can we change? What's the point?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I found in the last 3 years, people are sick and tired of Europe. A few years ago, when I set up a 100,000 petition to try to force a debate,
Indeed.
I invited everyone. Yeah. There was no one excluded, and we got some Labour politicians, Kate Hoey, Austin Mitchell, Calvin Hopkins. We had some Conservatives, that sort of some Green politicians, across the board.
Yeah.
And some UKIP, but not Nigel Farage.
Yeah.
He refused to. Dan Hannan refused to. Yeah, and a few other leading Eurosceptic organisations refused to be part of it.
Yeah.
Of course, when it was successful and the debate was forced, they wanted to claim their part of the success, which is a little galling.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. We achieved. We moved the argument forward.
Yeah.
But it is so fractious. If we all work together, but it's what I would call, it's the only Eurosceptic in the village, and I think Mr. Farage suffers from that more than anyone else. So that's my main job here. It's not the only thing I do, and of course most of the reason why people just think that I just bang on about Europe, to do a David Cameron phrase, is because that's all probably the media report. They don't look at the things that I do, that I'm doing a big thing about debt at the moment, about equality and planning. My human rights work that I do, and I'm not talking about the Strasbourg courts, I'm talking about where human rights means life or death. I was in Bahrain just before Christmas visiting prisoners of conscience.
Yeah.
I've been to Gaza. I was in Tunisia weeks after the revolution, meeting the interim government. And I've received many more invites. I just simply don't have the time. I was invited to be an election observer in Chechnya.
Yeah.
So, I really care passionately.
Yeah.
And one day I would like this Europe issue to be over. And I would like to, expand on some of that type of work, because I really feel I'm a Democrat. And I think that's probably where my annoyance of the European Union, the fact that we've never, as I talked earlier about the citizenship thing, no one asked me, and I feel really passionate that we live in a democracy, and many have died for that right to give us a democracy. And I feel strongly that in Britain, that we should have a democracy and we should choose, but I also feel passionately that everyone around the world should be given a chance to say how they're governed, and they shouldn't be imprisoned or tortured because they just want to say on how they're governed.
Well, that's a very good note to end it on. There we are, everyone. We have to leave it there. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found that interesting. Please leave a comment below and inform yourself a little bit about what's going on, especially to my American viewers. I know you appreciate the European dimensions sometimes. Nikki Sinclaire, thank you so much for your time today. An absolute pleasure.
Thank you.